They called him Aurelius the Sun-Eater, not for his conquests or his golden robes, but because his skin glistened like copper under the noon light, an unnatural sheen that no oil or powder could mimic. Some whispered he had no blood left, only liquid silver in his veins, relics of a bygone era that spoke of deeds as ephemeral as morning mist. But Aurelius wanted more. He wanted eternity. He wanted it now. In the heart of the citadel, there was a locked room with walls of mirrors. They'd watched the king step into it, but they could not see what lay within. Only the king knew what was in that room, and he shared its secrets only with the wind. All they knew was that every full moon, the king would pace those mirrored halls, his silhouette multiplied by 100, until the moon was nothing but a whisper in the sky. And in the center of that room was a pedestal, the one whose silhouette multiplied in the mirrored halls, and whose laughter echoed in the empty courtyards, a lonely, terrible sound. And that was the greatest curse of all, to outlive your kingdom, your people, your memories, and to be left alone with nothing but immortality and the cold echo of your own despair, always empty except when the king stepped onto it. Then they saw it bloom, rise and coil around his limbs like living silver, a liquid that danced like light and felt colder than snow. It shimmered like a god's tears, and the king drank it as if he were sipping spring water. So first came the cloaked men from the east who arrived under moonless skies, bearing strange gifts. But then came the tremors, the night terrors. He would seize in his sleep. His hands twitched when he signed edicts. Her love had once been enough to anchor his mind, but even she could not compete with the promise of eternal dominion. She begged him, knelt before him, even tried to smash the mercury basin with a silver hammer. But the king had her locked away in the hall of dust, where forgotten statues were kept. No one heard her voice again. His eyes grew red, not with fury but with rot. Yet he smiled through it all. Birds dropped from the sky mid-flight. Crops wilted despite the rain. The children of noblemen were born with glazed eyes and blue lips. The palace priests said the balance had been disturbed, that the king was no longer walking the path of men. Still, he ruled. Still, he drank. And yet he did not die. He grew thin, translucent, his veins like dark vines beneath parchment. His tongue stammered. He wept at paintings he once scoffed at, laughed at funerals like a madman, and sometimes stood naked in the gardens, murmuring to the stars. But he was alive. The court, fearful and fascinated, dared not question it. The body must fight death before it sheds it, he murmured to his trembling advisors. I am being reborn. They brought with them scrolls and retorts and vials filled with substances that pulsed in the dark. Among them was a scarred physician named Casson, whose fingers trembled whenever he touched gold. He claimed the philosopher's stone was real, that it could be distilled, that life could be stretched and strengthened, but not through fire or furnaces, but through sacrifice. But Aurelius had no patience for stones, no interest in elixirs that might prolong his life or imbue him with magical powers. He wanted life itself. He wanted it now. Others said he'd bartered his soul for a secret, the recipe to never die. But all roads led back to the same locked room in the citadel, the one with walls of mirrors. That's where he made himself anew. The king ruled over the kingdom of Felmir, a coastal empire veiled in mist and marble. Its court was a labyrinth of crimson drapes and echoing halls where no voice went unrecorded and no secret stayed hidden for long except his. For Aurelius wasn't a man obsessed with power or piety. He wasn't interested in waging war or winning glory. He didn't want to conquer new lands or build monuments to outlive him. He was a man obsessed with permanence, with not dying. Because as he often mused, what was the point of ruling over an empire that would one day crumble to dust? He wanted to be remembered, not as Aurelius the Sun-Eater or Aurelius the Unconquerable, but simply Aurelius, the king who lasted forever. His ancestors had left behind crumbling statues and worm-eaten scrolls, so the court chroniclers, forbidden from writing it down, later confessed on their deathbeds what they had seen. And at first nothing happened. It was his concubine, Lysara, who first tried to stop him. Then strange things began to happen in Felmir. For whatever he'd become, he was still the king who lived in the citadel veiled in mist and marble. From afar, the capital of Velmire looked like any other city. From up high, the spires of the palace seemed even pretty. But those who lived within its walls knew better. They felt the chill of its dying sun in their bones. Once he'd painted lovers in flower fields and sunlit prayers on chapel ceilings. Now he was asked to paint the king, not as he was, but as he had been. Inside it, rows of glass vials floated in mercury baths, each one labeled with the names of former alchemists, enemies and lovers. No one knew whether they held ashes, poisons or something far worse. And in the center, his throne, not made of gold but bone, rumored to be carved from the ribs of monks who had warned him of divine punishment. He sat there for hours, unmoving. He no longer issued laws. The nobles ruled in his name, but they did not dare remove him. For all his deformity, he had become a myth, a living god, or a dying one too stubborn to collapse. Aurelius, veiled behind curtains, instructed him every night, said they could hear a sound at night, not footsteps, not breathing, but dripping, a slow rhythmic drip as though Mercury itself was pacing the hallways, awaiting its final command. Make my eyes young, he'd whisper, not just in color, in desire. I want to see myself wanting again. Aelian obliged, trembling. But each time he unveiled the portrait, Aurelius screamed in agony, "It's wrong." He'd shriek. He doesn't remember what pain feels like. And he'd tear the canvas, staining his robes with pigment and blood. 10 portraits were made. 10 were destroyed. The 11th was painted in secret, without permission. Aelian painted not the king's face, but his reflection in a broken mirror, reaching toward his own rotting hand. When the king saw it, he fell silent. Then he wept. Days later, Aelian was found dead. Some said suicide. Others whispered of mercury poured into his wine. The years did not pass for Aurelius, king of Velarian. They circled him like vultures in a dying sky. One by one, his advisors changed. They were replaced by their sons, then grandsons, all sworn into the pact of silence, guarding the secrets of the kingdom and their king. But Aurelius remained. He was shriveled like a grape left on the vine too long. His fingernails blackened. His teeth yellowed and fell. His pupils shrank into pinpoints of ice. Yet his mind, grotesquely, grew sharper. He could recite ancient codes by heart, predict the tides not from weather nor disease, but from the soil. It gleamed faintly under moonlight, poisoned. When peasants tried to dig, their fingers blistered. The river that once fed Velma turned cloudy. Fish floated belly up for miles. Birds migrated and never returned. The kingdom began to die out its undying king. But Aurelius did not stop. Remember the scent of his mother's hair from 70 years prior. But he could no longer dream. That, he admitted, had been the first thing Mercury took from him. One day, the painter Aelian was summoned to his chambers. It was around this time that the trees surrounding the palace began to wither. He built a temple in the lower vaults, circular, without windows. The children of Velmire, when playing near the palace, thank you for watching. Once upon a time, in a kingdom far away, there lived a king who was very, very afraid of dying. No one dared open the throne room gates, not even the bravest guards. Past suits of armor that glinted dully in the torchlight, past long dead flowers and a broken harp, until she came to the throne room. At first, they were large, a finger, a kneecap, a piece of jawbone. Then smaller, teeth and ear bones and the charred remains of a document. The king who drank mercury for immortality ended not as a god, not a devil, but a memory so heavy it poisoned the earth. They called him the Sun Eater, but perhaps, in truth, it was the sun that ate him. Finally, a single lock of white hair, spun fine as cobwebs, drifted down from the ceiling. The sight of it sent a chill down Sella's spine, a premonition of winter and decay. For she knew in that instant that this was not the monster she had come to slay, but the last, pitiful remains of King Alaric II. And there in the center of the days sat a pile of bones. They were small and delicate, not like the Sun Eater she had imagined. In the years that followed, Velmore never recovered. Its rivers never cleared, its fields never bloomed again. The palace was abandoned, then buried by time and moss. But sometimes when the fog rolls just right across the cliffs, locals say, You can see a glint from within the ruins, like a mirror catching sunlight or a tear of silver, watching from the dark, yet somehow still terrifying. Then she noticed something else. On the wall above the throne, scrawled in trembling letters, was a final message. To not die is not the same as to live, it read. For if the king was dead, who would claim the throne? A queen from the north, a duke from the east, a prince from across the sea. All had their eyes on Velmir's crown, but none dared make the first move. Now, this king, Aurelius II, had heard tales of a wondrous draught, a liquid so potent that it could conquer even death itself. It was said the end did not come in fire or rebellion, but in silence. A winter arrived, colder than any in memory. Snow fell black from the sky, tainted by years of decay. The palace guards, wrapped in furs, refused to enter the king's chambers. His last servant, a mute boy named Dren, vanished one morning and was never seen again. No doors opened, no lights flickered. The throne room, once loud with petitions and quarrels, echoed only the whisper of wind. Now, outside the palace walls, people were dying of cold and hunger, but inside, no one dared check on the king. Then one night, while the nobles were gathered in hushed panic in the courtyard, a girl slipped past them. She was the daughter of a beggar who lived on the far side of the river. Her name was Sella, and she had grown up on stories of the Sun Eater, a legendary monster that lived in the palace and devoured anyone who looked upon it. So, when her father sent her to collect firewood from the abandoned palace, she was not a little afraid. She crept through the silent halls. As she stood there reading it, more pieces of bone fell from the pile on the dais. The king who had conquered death had instead become a spectre haunting these halls, a phantom made of bone dust and regret. And that, my little nightmares, is how the tale of Aurelius II